Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the Music for All podcast network, where we dive into conversations and ideas that celebrate and cultivate the rich culture of connection, creativity, collaboration in the band room. We're honored to have Yamaha as our national presenting sponsor. Yamaha's dedication to music education and its support of this podcast allows us to bring these important conversations directly to you. As stated in the intro, I'm David Duarte, your host for Culture Before Content, a podcast dedicated to the belief that building a strong culture is at the heart of everything we do. Through the experiences and insights of our guests, we examine how intentional culture shapes meaningful connections and supports the work that all of us do in the classroom. Well, at Music for All and within our Culture Before Content community, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. This podcast isn't just about sharing ideas. It's a space for meaningful conversations, practical strategies, and fresh perspectives to help us shape the culture in your band room. Each episode brings together educators and leaders sharing insights, experiences, and practical tools to inspire fresh ideas and meaningful growth. Whether you're just starting or looking to evolve and adapt, these conversations are designed to support you personally and professionally. I'm thrilled to keep learning with you and grateful to have you in this community. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you're joining us live, this is a great chance to be a part of the conversation. You can connect with us in real time, share your thoughts, and engage with the community. Just type it in and off we'll go. If you're catching the replay, you can watch the full video on Facebook or YouTube at any time, which is perfect for revisiting key moments or even exploring the conversation at your own pace. Would you prefer to listen instead? Audio episodes are available every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other major platforms. It's the perfect way to stay connected. Whether you're commuting, reviewing scores, rehearsal, updating ensemble seating charts, or planning sectionals, you can visit us at musicforall.org/podcast for all the details. We're excited to have you with us. All right, let's talk a little bit about last week. We had Irene Guggenheim Triana. Last week's episode featured her. She's a music educator from Springbrook High School in Maryland, and she shared her innovative approach to fostering a vibrant, inclusive band culture. She highlighted strategies like incorporating student ideas into traditions, peer teaching to strengthen connections, and adjudication preparation to encourage critical thinking. Irene also emphasized how her bilingual background helps her connect with students and families, creating an inclusive environment. Her focus on tailoring students' programs to students' unique strengths and introducing IB music showcased her commitment to meaningful cultural and musical growth. It was amazing. She was just a dynamo and just full of energy, and I suggest you go watch it. Well, let's get on to this week. I am excited for this week. This week, we have a great band director and also a personal friend. We have Ryan Messling. He's a band director at Prairie High School in Vancouver, Washington, known for fostering a strong student-centered band culture. His program emphasizes mentorship, openness, and creating a relaxed yet productive environment, which I can vouch for. Ryan prioritizes student leadership and collaboration, encouraging students to take ownership of their learning and contribute to the band's traditions. He is deeply committed to building meaningful relationships with the students, which he believes drives their engagement and success. Ryan's approach highlights the importance of trust, community involvement, and balancing fun with high expectations to create a thriving and inclusive band program. So without any further ado, please welcome to the show, Mr. Ryan Messling from Prairie High School.
Hey,
Hey,
David, it's so great
Ryan.
how's it going?
It's going good. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. You gotta have that little handshake of taking over here. So
Well, it's
why
good to
don't
be
you?
here.
It's great to have you. Why don't you take a moment and introduce, talk a little bit maybe about who you are, maybe your background, your school, just a little bit about you.
Yeah. As you said, I'm Ryan. I got before that, I'm from Spokane and went to high school there. Went to University of Idaho, got my degree in instrumental music education, and then came over to the Vancouver area. So I've been here for a while now. I've taught in Battleground Public Schools for almost a decade, and I've been at Prairie for about 10 years.
Wow. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to have you on the show so much is because I've actually had a chance to both personally and professionally get a chance to work with you. So, just telling my audience the story, this is how I remember meeting you. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Okay.
I needed a pickup put onto my bass. And I have no idea how to do that without destroying the string bass. And you said you would just come over and do it. And maybe talk about the first, I don't know much about the first time, but maybe how far was it that you came over and did all this just out of the goodness of your heart?
Yeah, well, you're in Washougal. I had to go from school, so it's probably about like a 25 or so 30-minute drive out. But I think that I remember that very clearly because I think oddly enough, you're the second person that reached out to me that was new to the area within that month. I had a friend Owen from Colorado that reached out to me as well. But I know how important it is in this music community we're in to kind of get integrated and involved. And as someone who's new, I'd want the same thing for me to kind of get them plugged in and introduce them to the area, and then also just to kind of help out the bass as being a bass player. That was something I felt really comfortable doing, and so yeah. Also, I didn't mention this, but your mentor, sorry, student teacher was one of my old students as well, Tony.
Oh, yeah.
So that's another level
Tony.
connection.
Yeah, shout out to Tony Brent's student teacher. He was also University of Idaho, and he teaches in your district, correct?
He does, yeah. He's the middle school band director at Daybreak Middle School.
Yeah, I forgot about that. And he
Yeah.
also subbed for one of my friends over in Ridgefield, and
Oh
did
yeah.
that subbing until they got the job. So he got a lot of fun experiences being a teacher.
Yes, he did.
But what I wanted to point out is that you were super selfless in your approach, and I think that started me thinking down the path of, like, creating that relationship of, like, hey, I can trust this person. So then, the next thing I know is one day you called looking for a woodwind specialist for your musical. And that's where I not only did I say yes, because I was very appreciative of the fact that you came over, like, hands down. But then I got a chance to not only work with your student and not work with your students. I literally played with your students as opposed to working with them. But I got a chance to see you and interact with your students firsthand. And it's kind of like what started our relationship, going on building that culture behind your program. But what I observed is you just have this really unique, natural, you have a great rapport with your students. They treat you with amazing respect. And the thing that I noticed is the level of musicianship that's coming out of your students is just fantastic. And so, like, that kind of enamored me. So, like, this year you asked me to play again with your musical, and I got a chance.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you for working my clarinet chops to death.
Of course.
But it was even more because, like, I got to work with way more of your students this time. And again, it was that same feeling of, like, I admire you so much for the relationship and rapport you have with your students. And that's why I wanted to bring you on the show, because it's a chance to talk about, some of the things that you do. So let's start off on the culture bandwagon here. Just talk about, what does culture mean to you with your own program?
Yeah, the culture pretty much is everything involving how students feel in my classroom. So, the physical space, the way that students interact with each other, kind of the hierarchy of student leadership, and a combination of all those things, among others, I think is just kind of encompassing to the culture of the room and the culture of the program as a whole. So when it comes to establishing that culture, it's really important to be very intentional with kind of everything you do and the words you say, and then the space you have created for those students.
So what are some of the things that you have done? Like, you said you've been there for about 10 years. What are some
Yeah.
of the things that you discovered that you've done, or what are some of Ryan's go-tos to make your program work? Because, I see, like, every time I go into your band room, I always, like, scan your boards. I'm always, like, looking at the things, seeing what the pep band's doing, seeing, like, call times and all these things. But you have a very unique approach to that. But what are some of the things that you do to build that culture in your band room?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, being intentional, being genuine with my students to build a culture of excellence and leadership, I guess I would say, is making sure that students know that they have a place in the band room no matter what. So whether they're my top player and they want to do all state and solo ensemble and go and do this beyond the band room, like outside of school in the college field or in the community, or if they're a kid that just wants to have a place to express themselves creatively and a safe place to exist for an hour a day in band class, I want a culture that allows both of that to happen. I don't want to create a one pathway culture for my students. So there is some grace and leniency and flexibility I allow obviously within limits and with communication and we'll talk about that later, to have my students exist and feel like they could own their experience and own their own education, um, every day.
And where do you attribute, like, how did this come to be? Like, this is something that you did naturally, something you've discovered, or something that you learned? Where does this come from your standpoint?
It's funny because there's a few things. I'm a father now. I have two daughters, and the pandemic also kind of happened around that same time. So that transition was pretty big, I would say, in my career. And before that, I would say I was definitely a little different. I was more directed towards like getting stuff done, work, results, putting in the time, putting in the rehearsals. And um, I felt like it was getting good results, but it wasn't as enjoyable for the students. And there was kind of a disconnect where, students came into my room and they knew they had to work and they had to do these things and they could do it and they were okay with that. But there was something missing. There was kind of that personal touch. There was that playfulness, that humor that was kind of missing, I would say. And on the picture right there, you could see we do a lot of things to kind of help with that. So this is a picture from, oh gosh, it's a while ago, but it's at our local corn maze farm for the fall time. And we try to do something once a month outside the classroom that has nothing to do with music. And it allows students to kind of exist together and to kind of interact and hang out without having to worry about the music or reaching a certain goal together. It's just to have fun and connect.
Yeah, is that something that's your organization, you organize, or is it something your students organize?
It's something that we brainstorm together. I'm really big about like having the students be a part of the process in figuring out what we want to do in our program. And my big message is like, this is your program. I'm the facilitator, I'm the band director, the overseer, the educator, but this is ultimately the program that you are, existing in and living in every single day as students. And what better person to know what students want than students? So, myself and students come together. We have band executive meetings once a month, and it's led by students, and it's great. I'm always kind of like a fly on the wall for those. And sometimes they forget I'm there because I just will listen. And they go, "Oh, Messling, what do you think? You're in the back of the room." And so it's always interesting because it's like when you're gone and you see your students interact, I feel like that's the true test. What are they talking about? How are they treating each other? How does the communication look like? Is there someone leading the show? Is it organized? And so, yeah, I think that that's kind of important to be able to plan for those things and create those type of social events and norms in your program.
How does your student leadership function? Like, is it something like the program I inherited? It's always seniors that pass it down to the next set of seniors. So that's kind of what I've inherited. I've just kept it in place. Although this year's been a challenge because I only have 7 seniors. This is the COVID transition year, as I call it. I only have 7 seniors. They're doing a
Yeah.
bang up job. But as we've morphed and transitioned, every once in a while, what I'm trying to get at is every once in a while I have to step in and maybe guide them a little bit. But for the most part, I let them loose. Like I know that this week we have movie night. I love movie nights.
Oh yeah.
And so
What movie
I
you
got
guys watching?
we're doing it's I don't know if this is like I know it is. It's the musical this year, so we're doing Wizard of Oz for our musical. So they're
Okay.
going to watch the Wizard of Oz, and of course, I wish they could have like given me a little heads up because I watched the Wizard of Oz over break. So, oh, it is what it
Double
is. And then
dipping. Yeah.
yep, and then you spoke about it, and they have game night coming up, which is very popular in my band culture. So we have, we set up about as many video stations as we can. We've become the king of board games, and all those things. But those are student led things that they like sometimes I have to guide, but I don't step in much. So how does your leadership function in your band program?
So I'd say the leadership functions pretty similar. I have a lot of students that are also involved in ASB and other leadership aspects of our building, so that helps a lot. The only like senior and like junior or like grade specific roles I have are for my drum major and my drum minor. And unless my drum minor really does a poor job or decides to not move on or whatever else it is that's associated with the conversation, but they would automatically become the drum major. And then I choose someone who would be replacing them as a drum minor. And part of that too, in that process alone, I consult with my drum major because they're going to be working with them closely, and I want to make sure it's going to be a good fit for the team and good for the program, but also the students. These are people that are going to be not in charge of directly, but kind of directing the band at football games and basketball games and helping organizing different events and, directing the band for parades. And so they want people that they're going to respect. And I want people they're going to respect because it's going to make the job a lot easier. And it's not something you have to fight for and gain and then be able to move forward. It's just kind of like, okay, this is something that's established. We're going to continue and move forward. So besides that, though, one thing I stress is like in my band program, especially, there's no like divide and grade. There could be a sophomore who is just as capable as a senior in my program. And I like to stress that importance, especially because oftentimes it could be the case. So that's kind of a unique thing, I think, because sometimes people fall into the trap of, oh, sorry, this is for, upperclassmen only. And there's lots of missed opportunities and missed students that kind of fall between the cracks.
Oh, I'd love to dive into that because that's like something I inherited where it was a senior driven thing, and slowly but surely I'm trying to morph it into like those that are most deserving, because I think
Mhm.
even in our own society, does seniority count more, or do we want people that get the best job done? What do you think about that? This is my
I'm on the
hot
ladder.
take.
Yeah. Hot take of the day. I'm on the
Oh,
ladder. I think that okay, for example, when I first came to my program, the bands were auditioned already, right? So the bands were established and created. And the first week of jazz band specifically, because it's a little bit more manageable at a jazz band level,
mhm.
like wind ensemble, there's just a lot more moving pieces, as you would know. But with the jazz band, I was like, oh, I don't know. I kind of want to change some things up already. And so re-auditioned some parts and caused some waves to happen, but in good ways. And in the long run, it really worked out because people saw like, oh, okay, Mr. Messling really values the product and the process of what we do. And if someone's not working with the process and they're working against the process, he's going to help us because ultimately students want that. Students
Oh
that
yeah.
want to be there, they want to be there. And people that are fighting against that and going against the grain, even if they don't want to admit it, they they don't like that. So yeah.
Uh, is there anything you do for like, because that always sparks my brain, like, a student that's antagonizing or someone who's like goes against the norm? Is there, I mean, what are things that you do? Do you do you try to just influence them, or is it the kids that help drive some of that, get rid of some of that antagonism?
I tend to kind of like those kids, oddly enough, and I relate to them in a way. But I honestly find that one-on-one conversations and just being honest and genuine with kids will resolve a lot of that. And just say, listen, um, the way you're treating this situation is not helping anyone. And like, what's the cause of that? What's happening? How do we get to the bottom of this? And just letting them know, like, if this is going to continue, it cannot exist in this space because the space we're creating is supposed to be X, Y, and Z, and this is going against that. So, laying out the law and laying those expectations, I think, early and often is really important. I don't want to say making an example of someone because that's not what it is really,
Right.
but at least like letting people know like this is something you can't get away with and something that we don't tolerate.
Yeah, and so like it's funny because like just in my observation of you with your students, I don't think I have ever in my life, and we've known each other for about 4 years now. I don't think I've
Mhm.
ever seen you raise your voice. I've never seen you ever have to like, I've never seen you have to like you say lay down the law. I just feel like you have such an amazing rapport with your students. It's just more like statement, get it done, statement, get it done. And I think that's what all, at least for me, that's what that's what I admire, because I'm always looking for that in myself. Because again, I've been teaching for a few years, but we kind of go with what you've learned back in the day, and you
Yeah.
can't, and I'm trying my hardest to always get out any of that negativity, but every once in a while you catch yourself going, "Ah, okay." And
Yeah.
so how have you changed any in your 10 years? Have you backed off? Have you, I mean, are you much looser, I guess I should say?
Yeah. And I would say, and this, a lot of it's ironically enough, like with personal growth, it was like a lot of selfishness at the beginning of my career. I had my own agenda and my own like goals I wanted for myself. And sometimes I would, put that onto the students as well. And with learning and growing in my career, I've noticed like, and this is going to offend maybe some people, but I often say like, it's just high school band. Like these kids are the most important part, obviously, and it's we know the power that band can bring at the high school level. But when at the end of the day, oftentimes I'm thinking like these are just kids. They're high schoolers, and they have 20 other things they have going on in the day, and I have to realize that as a perspective. So that's part of it. But go on.
No, I was just gonna say that's one of the things that I've noticed that as I got older is I think I've gotten more to that attitude. Yeah, it's just high school band, and we all can do it our own way and do it differently. And still, what's the at the end of the day, what's the most important part of band? And to me, it's just providing kids with a musical experience that I hope they take on with them for the rest of their lives. It's that a bit it's the experience that I crave, not it's not this hard driving note that band is everything, because I think in life we have to parcel ourselves. Our interests change, our lives change. This is important, and like I said, I want to talk about you as a professional too, because that's the other reason I wanted you on here. But just making sure that band is important to the kids that are there, and it's whatever works for the community that you're in. Is that an agree or I got more games? Agree or disagree?
I always say, and I've said this since the beginning, like my job is to teach music, but most importantly, my job is to teach kids through music. And so whether that's teaching them about themselves or teaching them how to work hard or teaching them that they're capable than more than they realize, it's all those things wrapped into one. And yeah, we're going to learn our scales. We're going to learn our arpeggios. We're going to learn, whatever else we need to learn to make really beautiful music, because making beautiful music is fun. And that's part of that. But when it comes down to it, the students' needs and the needs of those individuals stacked up is greater than anything. So that's my take on it.
Let's move on to some other topics, because this is the other reason I have it. So not only are you a great teacher, you're also an incredibly good musician. I am like you and what I want to talk about on the aspect is, what do you do besides being a band director? What are some of the things that you do on the outside to keep Ryan?
Yeah. I do a lot of that stuff. And as you said, I play bass. I played a gig this last Friday at Cedars Public House, and have another one coming up in the next few weeks. And I try to stay busy musically with my jazz trio and different groups I play in. As you know, we also just played for a good friend of ours' wedding, who's a band director at Skyview High School. And so I think that's important for kids to see you doing what you expect them to do. And so I do that, and I talk about that with them all the time, and like how you prepare for that. And kids ask me questions. It just kind of comes up organically, which is the beauty of it. Like, Mr. Messling, like, you have a gig this Friday. How do you have time to like prepare for that when you're at this basketball game right now on Thursday night? And my answer is always, I've been preparing for years. I've been preparing for decades. And it started right now when you guys are in high school. Like that, this is you guys preparing for that. And so being able to teach them that, I think really is a nice kind of sequencing. They go, okay, so this is not going to happen next year. This is not going to happen maybe the year after. But another adventure I have, and I talk to the students about often, is my business. That's a screenshot there, as you can see from our website. It's called Social Sound. And it's a business that is entertainment business for weddings and corporate events and things like that nature. And so oddly enough, and this shocked me. So this is like surprisingly connected to my education job. So I joined the Greater Vancouver Chamber and have been a part of that with my business. And it's been so phenomenal, because in that one process, I have introduced myself to so many people in the community that could help my band program, and who are looking to help band programs in the area, both financially and just resources, different nonprofits that have resources unused by band programs and arts programs in the area I would have never known about, even knew they existed. So these ventures also kind of tie back into my job. But that's part of me outside of this classroom, the social sound, and being a musician. But you and I have sat down. Gosh, was this last summer? It was a long time ago, or when was that? This
It
summer?
feels like it was like
Yeah.
August, I want to say.
Yeah. And started talking about some things we could do in our area musically to help strengthen our community and create a resource and tool for people in our area. And something that came from that is this jam session we started. And that's something
Yeah.
I'm super excited about.
But isn't it like in an hour and a half? I think, is it today?
It is. Yeah, it's at 6 o'clock. So we have a jam session we started, and it is for high school and beyond musicians that need a place to play music in a safe environment. Being that we're in Vancouver, Washington, we're real close to Portland and about like 15 minutes away. But a lot of parents, especially high school parents, don't want their kids traveling down into Portland during the week unaccompanied. So this is a really cool opportunity because there's nothing that exists like this, and it's a chance for high school kids to play music in a professional level with professional musicians in a safe environment.
Yeah, so shout out for my students if you're listening. Don't forget, you got about an hour and a half. Get the Billy's Blues. And the reason I wanted to actually, it's a good thing you brought that up because that's what some of the things I wanted to talk about was, we for those of you who don't know, we live in Vancouver, Washington, which is nowhere near Vancouver, British Columbia. By the way, I find half of my time of just saying I live in the Portland area to stop that. So we're like 5 hours from Canada. So Vancouver is only about our whole county is like 500,000 people, but the city of Vancouver itself is only about 200,000 people. So it's just trying to find spaces for students to go on the outside because as I have learned and at least my experience has spoken is when our students connect to the professionals in the music community that are not necessarily us as the teachers, things start to happen. And so like I know for a couple of weeks ago, now that you brought this up, like I had a student come to me it was Monday and they're like, Billy's Blues was amazing. I learned so much. I can't wait to go back. And it's like, that's exactly what I want to hear. Because for those of you who don't know, it's a jazz improv opportunity for our students to go learn because where else are they kids going to learn? I'm a classical sax player, so they're going to learn a little bit of Creston. I don't know. And so sorry to say, but and again that goes back to this thing. Not only did we talk about that, we talked about helping the band directors in our community because you're at a 3A high school, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that right? So for those of our listeners, 3A is like 5A in most schools, and I'm at a 2A school, which is like 4A. So it's like you're the second tier down, I'm the third tier down in terms of school size, but we're definitely not in the largest schools. And your school district has 2 high schools.
Yes,
right?
2 high schools.
2 high
schools. The other high
Mine
school is A4.
Yeah, that's right. They are, and they're one of the largest high schools in the area, right?
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah, but even then, we're talking about this is why we started meeting is just providing opportunities since we all come from 1, 2, 3 school districts or high school districts. That how can we connect and make it so that we have a network? And I thought that was the most incredible thing in terms of our community here in Vancouver is this is like what I would say not the first attempt, but it is a great attempt at getting our students connected, like on a professional development kind of basis for those kids, and then bringing all that back to home. And let's see, what are some of the other things that you had talked about, ideas? I just like throwing these out there, give people ideas.
Yeah. So another thing, I guess, and this is something we're partnering with Music World, our local music store, and my business Social Sound, and we're creating. I also have a passion for creating that non-musical, and this actually is perfect because I have some people, I guess, that Camden says hi. It's a little comment that I popped in. This is Divine Interventions. Perfect. Camden's one of my guitar students from years ago or a year ago or so. And I teach guitar as well, alternating years. So a passion of mine too is also creating musical opportunities for band kids. If they miss the boat back in 5th or 6th grade, and then they're done, they can't experience music for the rest of their school, and I think that's kind of wrong. So
why is that?
It's so bizarre to me. It's like it's a once or done kind of thing. So I have a guitar class, which is awesome. And I find like at the beginning of the year, I'm like, oh, guitar class. And then once it starts going, we have, more and more of these kids just getting so excited about music that didn't even know they had that in them. So they get dumped in the class, and then first semester rolls around. Then by like time November, December comes around, kids are like, I'm getting a guitar for Christmas. I'm getting lessons. I'm so into this. I love it. And what can I do? They're asking me these very specific questions. And I love it. So another part of that passion is I created with a friend of mine, Owen, this Clark County Battle of the Bands. And so it's something that is for high school aged musicians that are in, bands, whether it's like singer-songwriter, rock band type stuff, pop band, country bands, electronic music, whatever it is. And it allows them to have an outlet to perform and showcase their talent.
I should invite you over to my school because it's funny because that was like one of the first comments out of my mouth at every school that I've been at since I retired was, why do we not have more opportunities for kids? If you don't make that life decision in fourth or fifth grade, it seems like you've been eliminated from the band conversation. And so like that hit me. It just kind of struck me because that's like one of the first things is I wanted to have an opportunity for kids because sometimes you're right, they pick up guitar and most people don't pick up guitar at a young age. They pick it up, right around middle school, high school. I know for a fact one of my percussion students is in love with the guitar, and that's really, I mean, my percussion class is kind of dived between kids who've had percussion their whole lives and an opportunity for those kids. But I can sense it in him that he wants to play guitar full time, and that's where his passion goes. And we'll do our best. But what I would think it would be amazing if we as a community of educators always had at least one class at our schools where the kids could take it and get a musical experience that's not, don't take this again, I'm on hot take day for some reason, band, orchestra, or choir, because, and taught by one of us, because it's, I think that, some of my experience in the past is helpful maybe for those kids, even if it's not my area. Like I would love to have a guitar class. I would love to have some of those things. And just again, and so you said it was alternating years, correct? On the guitar.
Yeah, and I think it's important because it's like both sides of the spectrum, really. So like one side I have this guitar class for like non-music kids, and the other side's my AP theory class for like my high achieving kids. And so I just had a student of mine who's now, funny small world, he's at Lipscomb in Tennessee, and he's doing a music business degree, and he came back over the Christmas time and he spoke to my guitar class, which is something I like to do. I have old students come back and professionals and different people in the community come and speak to my classes to create an enriched experience, but also to show like these diverse pathways in our field. Oftentimes, I know it's kind of a tangent now, but oftentimes
are our thing.
Here you go. We find that like the pathway we send students in band is like band director or performance or composition, like these like main 2 or 3 kind of tunnels. But this year I had one of my old students win their first Grammy for engineering stuff, audio engineering. I've had students go and do music business stuff. I've had students do music therapy, and I have students doing that right now in their master's program. So it's really important, I think, to kind of showcase everything because that's a bigger net to cast.
Yeah. And so I'm going to, personal share some of that just from my experience. I had a couple kids from my engineering class. They're both playing in the jazz program at Clark College. And these are kids who found the class at Washougal. And now they're in part, like it's funny. It's like my worlds cross somehow. They, and I barely had them. Like I call it like 10 minutes. I had them for jazz because one needed to learn to be a guitar player and learn how to read music. The other's a bass player, and again, he just picked that up right and went crazy on it. And that was his project in music production. And now here they are finding the world that I know and love just because the opportunity presented itself. So I guess maybe the hot take is, what opportunities are we not offering our kids, or what are we doing with the opportunities that we have with our kids in our programs that we could do that produce more musicians or produce just more interested people in music?
Yeah, the thing I keep going back to this year is just Field of Dreams. Like if you build it, they will come. Creating that opportunity will birth the art and birth the experience for those students, I think.
Yeah, it's great. I also wanted to talk about that because one of the pictures that you had, I thought it was your jazz band standing in front of the University of Idaho Jazz Festival. Can you talk about talk about your success at that festival and maybe what that festival is? Because again, here's the other part of your program that you have. You travel with your program quite a bit. Like I remember last year, I think you had a Disney trip, but you've gone to the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. But not only that's not the point of that is jazz festivals are great, but what experiences do those festivals provide for your kids? How does that part of your culture?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of my culture. And I want to start by saying the competition part is not a huge part of my culture. And I try to make it that. And you and I both know we've had lengthy conversations about this in the past. And I know this might also be a hot take. It's a
I'll take hot takes. I love
but
them.
I usually have a trophy around a string as my bathroom pass in our classroom to kind of send a strong message. But we value making beautiful music and working together and doing all those things, but not the piece of plastic you get at the end of it. We don't do it for that reason. We do it to challenge ourselves and to prove to ourselves that we could do something really hard if we put our minds to it. This picture is from Littlehampton Jazz Fest from a while ago. They stopped doing this backdrop for the winning groups a while back, but and actually this is, and you can see Tony in the front row.
I do see Tony.
And a few other individuals. This is from a long time ago, but this was the first group I think that I had as a teacher go back and win. So it's kind of a unique experience for me, my alma mater showing up. And Littlehampton Jazz Fest is, I'd say, probably one of the top 3 biggest, right? Reno and Monterey and Littlehampton are probably up there. And we went ahead and like 36 bands in our division, we took first, and I was flabbergasted. I was like, oh my gosh, what we're doing is working. These kids are putting in the work and they're loving it. They're having fun. There's smiles on those faces. And then the next year we did the same thing. We got first place again. And then the year after that, I think we got second. The year after that, we got first. So I think the first 4 years we won 3 of them, and we've been getting second place and kind of being competitive and since then. And then, I do think it's important to have it as a motivator for some kids, not for all, but there's some kids. I have like some like athletic band kids, and like competition, they live and breathe it, eat it. So definitely going to be a motivator for some, but it's not our focus. We like to have fun. We like to be goofy. We like not do yourself in the process. So, but yeah, and we've been kind of competing ever since then. We're doing California in April, like end of March, beginning of April. We're going to Southern California, and I've just been watching the fires in LA, and it's just heartbreaking to see that, and it's going to be a very different trip because of that, and it's going to be different, but just more so my heart goes out and breaks for those people in LA right now. So
yeah, the definitely horrible tragedy. And then again, it just speaks to the cultural side of things of like, you don't think of it as, I'm traveling to LA, but there's a cultural side of like life that impacts even when we do stuff through music. And so like, how do you, this is my thing, when you're taking first, second, second, and in this large group, it also comes with a kind of like how your band program has to be set up. How do you replace all of those students that graduate from year to year? Because that's some of the things that I think we band directors have. Like for my brain, when it comes to jazz, I'm always on the track of I've got to always have a drummer. So who's the drummer down the road? I've always got to have a lead trumpet player. Who's the lead trumpet player down the road? I've got to have all these got to haves that I have in place that I'm always searching for that next thing. So what is your recipe for constantly, and again, I've heard your band this year, what's this constant recipe for producing a lead trumpet, a great trumpet section, a great rhythm section, all of it? How do you continuously churn out those musicians in your program?
Well, part of it starts with being able to see it being done. So like the students that are graduating are modeling every day to the other kids what they do and how they do it. But I do a program called Band Buddies, and it's something I created, I don't know, probably my second or third year at Prairie. And the Band Buddy system is every 9th grader gets assigned to a band student that's typically a junior or a senior. And I take like a first like week or 2 of the school year to kind of get to know my 9th graders a little bit and figure out who they're going to work well with. Because this is very intentional. I choose students that typically play the same instrument as them. And this band buddy system is created, number one, to be able to help students have someone they can go to with anything. Any questions about the school, like, hey, what's the schedule today? Like, hey, what's this event like? Should I get involved in this? I want to do a club. How do I do that? And it's a peer. So it's someone that's not as scary, hopefully. So we have like an initial contact at a football game for band buddies. They exchange contact info, however way they want to do that. And then there's little things throughout the year that we do, like a sock exchange for our concert, our holiday concert, and little things like that. We do Secret Santa events and things like that, and different social events. But these band buddies were created to help someone be like, okay, here's what I do. Here's how you could do that at a musical level and a social level, whatever it is. And I feel like that's a good way to replace those students and kind of create a path for those students to get there. I have a second jazz band, which is also super helpful. And so I created that second jazz band during my time at Prairie. I think it took like about 2 years to 3 years to get that off the ground, because you'd find an ensemble, and then you'd have like 1 year we had, I don't know, probably 12 saxophones and 2 trumpets. So you have these funky instrumentations, but that's part of the fun. It's part of the process. And these kids, they work hard because they want it, and they see other people working hard in the next room, and it encourages them to work hard. So I feel like that's just kind of the secret to the recipe.
I'm always looking for like different people's take on that because here's another question for you because okay, so we had this COVID thing. I don't know why this thing keeps coming up. Seems like it was
I know,
big
right?
thing. But I took over my program literally like I was the first band director post COVID. And so I had to not only like figure out what traditions were behind me, but I also had to like kind of move forward without the kids kind of remembering the traditions other than kind of like their perception of them. Did any of that, like that band buddy system, did that take any kind of hit during COVID? Was there any alteration you had to do moving forward? Like, kind of like describe how your band has been the last 4 years. Did you have to go through any of those changes? I mean, and if you did, what did you do to kind of counteract it?
100%. And I would say the best way to describe it is I used to have my upper 2 grades be able to teach the bottom 2 grades. But after COVID, I had to teach all 4 grades how it was done. So I also had some things fighting against me. So I'm trying to think. I believe the freshmen, once we got into the classroom, the freshmen that when the pandemic hit were then like juniors at the end of their junior year when they came back into the classroom. And so they thought they had an idea because they were freshmen when they last saw it. They thought they had an idea of what it looked like in the classroom and what the culture looked like and how things functioned in our program. But I was finding like they had this wrong idea of what things looked like. So it was my job to then reteach them like, no, this is not how we function. This is not how this is supposed to work or how we communicate with each other. This is how we do it. And then like there was some reteaching that happened there, which then trickles down. But it was kind of like a etch a sketch. Like we just shook it up and we had to start from scratch. So I would say that was probably the biggest hill to climb because, it was starting from the bottom floor.
Yeah, and that's what I always ask because I kind of think all of us kind of had to like punt at a few moments here of like, okay, here's the thing that's been working for my whole career, and now I've got to figure this out. And so, and maybe talk about that. How long do you feel like shared vision in your students took? I mean, there was the shared vision I'm sure that you encountered when you got there. Your program's been around, your school's been around for a little while. And so like how long did it take for that vision to, kind of get in alignment when you took over? And then when COVID hit, how long did it take to reset?
I'll answer that question, but to comment on the fact that my school's been around a long time, this has nothing to do with age, and I will not mention years, but, actually my old professor, Vanessa Seelert, was a student at my high school, that I teach at. So it
I
does
did
really
not
come
know
full
that.
circle. Yeah. But to kind of talk about how long it took, I would say about 2 years, a year and a half to 2 years. And it took like, a lot of teaching and reteaching. There's a lot of like little snippet, like little small things that I say to students that are really consistent. And it's something that a good friend of mine, Douglas Orfino, and Claire Verity, 2 colleagues of mine, Claire, uh,
Mhm.
created before the pandemic. So one of these things, I'll share them with you. One of them is funny because once again, we created this before the pandemic, and now since the pandemic, it has a different meaning. But just ignore that whole pandemic thing, and it'll make more sense. So,
I'll try.
so the things these are our pillars of our program, and this is kind of like what we stand behind. So the first one's we are ensemble. The second one is reach higher. The third one is do the work. The fourth one is risk, fail, rise. The fifth one is take off your mask. And the sixth one is burn brightly. These are things that we tell students and go in kind of detail more about, but we are ensemble thing is really big. This idea of like belonging and sense of teamwork, and we are ensemble, is something that I say all the time to my students. And not as much recently because I feel like I haven't needed to, but that was definitely something I mentioned during the like that growing time that I said a lot, because after the pandemic, like being a part of a community was super crucial, and reminding those kids like we are an ensemble, like you could lean on this a little bit. We're a group. I think that was really helpful.
Yeah, shout out to Claire, your drama teacher. What a fantastic
Yes.
individual out there. And just say thank you to Claire, because like what an impact she's had on my teaching, by the way, because that's the other thing about going to watch other people's band programs. Sometimes you get to go, like I've got to watch you teach, a good 2 months of my life. But I've also got to watch Claire teach with her drama kids, and the impact that has. And it goes back to those things like, if we all could think of like words, relationships. And that's, I think that's the crux of what it is building those relationships to get what I have. And then there's trust. And I think that's a harder one to define. Like, how do you, I'm not asking the question, it's rhetorical. How do you build the trust, to get to that point? Because, here's one of the things I know about you. You have high expectations, but there has to be that sense of trust. And so let's talk about culture and pedagogy for just a second, because we've talked about, the things that have made the culture of your band program successful. And to my audience, his demeanor is amazing. You never go. I'm excited to, like, if a cup of coffee arrives, I'm excited all the time. And so, like, sometimes I'm like, I have to catch myself kind of be more in the middle of on those. But does your culture affect your pedagogy? How does culture allow you to do what you do? And what is some of your pedagogical secrets to making your band great?
A lot of it is based on modeling, the culture of modeling, and it starts with me. And so one thing that I do as from a pedagogical standpoint, and I've found that like I could tell kids stuff all day long, and there's a disconnect if I'm telling them something and they're good kids that are passionate, but they aren't doing it, or maybe not doing it correctly. I'm like, what's happening here? Like, I know you guys care. I know that you have the drive to do it. You're good kids. And when it came down to it, I realized these kids just didn't know how to practice. And I would say, go practice this, or like, make sure you practice this tonight, or make sure you look that over. And of course we talk about ways to rehearse things in class, but they didn't make that connection on practice. We talk about, using a metronome all the time, and these little things that we always say as a soundboard as band directors. But I thought, what's an effective way to show or teach practicing? And I was like, well, I could show it to them. So something I started, actually, I think Tony's senior year was probably the first year I did this, is I would start class by having my bass out in front of the students. And this is if you don't know the book Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, I recommend it. And he talks about
do I.
being vulnerable. And so this is really vulnerable for me. And I always tell the kids, like, this is something that is not necessarily like fun for me. Like, I don't enjoy practicing my instrument in front of you guys, but this is the benefits to it. And I'll just sit there for probably 8 to 10 minutes, and I'll have kids write notes. And it sounds kind of weird, but the conversation that comes after that is phenomenal. And the way that kids understand like how to practice, and there's little things we say like practice isn't pretty, that changes their perspective on their instrument and how they approach their instrument.
That's a good, that just popped in my head. Maybe teaching my kids, because what I've learned about kids, getting them to practice is always like the main event, but they confuse practice with playthrough. And so getting them to like set a goal and achieve it, and maybe I like what you just said. I don't know if you caught it, but it's like, what changed? And maybe that is a good motivator for me to use on them. When you practice, tell me 5 things on what changed. And then, it's kind of funny though. And I think I realize for most of us band directors, those of us who used to practice 3, 4, 5 hours a day. And I always have to catch myself not saying that to my students, because I don't want them ever to catch. It doesn't take 4 hours of practice. It's just that it's like a video game for me. I started enjoying my video game. It's 4 hours passed. I didn't go in and say, I've got to do 4 hours today. I had to, and I think it goes back to what you just said. I had to set a goal, and that goal was when I achieved it, and I would lose track of time of so much. And I'm trying to instill and find better ways to say that to the students. Because like you said, how do we get kids to practice? Well, we model for them. And so I love that. And I think we, like I said, I even, I don't know if you can see back there, my alto usually sits right there,
I
but
see
it's
it.
missing.
Yeah,
Well, that's my soprano.
it's the
My
case.
alto is, yeah, my alto is missing because I took it to school because I think that modeling is important. So what else besides modeling is important for your pedagogy?
Yeah, I would say also integrating kind of every aspect of music, the notation, the reading, the sight reading. We do a lot of sight reading, um, and I think that that's really crucial. And not just doing it for the sake of like competition or the sake of a purpose, besides just like our own betterment. I think that's really important because if students think they're doing it for something that's outside of them, then it's a different purpose. But if they're doing it for themselves, for their own betterment or for their own personal growth, I think that's really huge. So we do a lot of like theory Thursdays. We'll connect a lot of theory to what we're doing in class, and we'll talk about like scale patterns and how to identify that visually and sonically, and with that obviously ear training. But one thing that my students can't stand at first, and then they oddly enough love it. You probably know where I'm going with this, is singing. And I do this a lot in the pit because it involves a lot of it. But um, you know, just getting the kids to sing it changes so much. It changes so much. And at first, like I said, they're just like, oh, all the eyes are rolling. They're just it's their least favorite day. And then by like week 2, week 3, they're like, we should sing that. Oh, okay, let's sing that. And they're the ones kind of guiding the ship, which I think is great. And I'm always encouraging that.
Oh my goodness, it's funny you say that because I was judging a festival last weekend. It was online, so I was doing it, and I think I caught myself, realizing every band needs to sing more because not only you can hear it in the way that you phrase, you can hear it in the way that you articulate, you could just hear it, and that singing would fix so much of it. And I was thinking from in terms of intonation purposes, I just like, how do you get a kids to play into, like, we could go hours on pedagogy, like it's like my thing.
Oh yeah.
But like, how do you get people to play in tune? It has nothing to do with looking at the tuner. Who can't look at a tuner and make the dial move? It's that next step that I would someday love to talk about with somebody. But are there any other pedagogical things that you do that's important?
I've tried a lot of different things, and I've tried some things on. One thing that I liked a lot, and I might bring back this year, is a while back I did. We handed out just a pitch tendency chart, and as like a homework assignment, I gave kids to go home and with their instrument, with the tuner, and play each note at these different volumes. Everything like barrel pushed all the way in or whatever it is, this specific set for their instrument, and then recording their tendencies. And then when we go in there, and this is a little overkill, but we'd get a new piece of music, and all those notes that were within past a certain limit, they had a circle and put an arrow going up or something. And then that was the training wheels. Eventually that'd go away because it was not needed in the first place, right? It was getting corrected. But when I did that, I was shocked. My wind ensemble, especially, it helped more than anything else, of the results and how that changed the intonation of my group.
Intonation. I think I could have this conversation with people over and over and again because I have my intonation quizzes that are coming this week, and maybe I'll speak it down these in the future. It has been my secret to my success is getting my kids to match through listening, singing, and then finally voicing and adjusting, because that's, I think, the one thing we forget about is you can't just blow into the horn. Oh, look, I tuned. I mean, all my notes are in tune. It's like I play saxophone here. That's not happening. So all right. So here's the scary fact of the day. We have kind of run out of time.
Oh no, that's fast.
I know it's like 50. I told you it would go fast.
I know.
But here's your ultimate question of the day, and what I like to ask everyone as we get out here. And that is, actually, I'll ask you the question, then don't leave because I have some other things here. Is what does culture mean to Ryan Messling, or what advice do you have for culture? Anything on culture? You get the final take on culture.
All right. I think that culture means building really long-lasting and meaningful relationships with your students, to be able to create a place for them where they feel they belong and feel like they are safe. and they could grow at their own pace. I think that's really important. And so culture means that you create a place where kids can work hard and they expect that and they know that that's expected of them, and you'll give them the tools to be able to achieve that.
Oh, look at
Takes
the
a lot of
comment that
trust.
just look at the comment that just came on the screen there. So our listeners, Kevin Fitzgerald, modeling is so important. I believe teachers like us forget about those super basic fundamentals of practicing and teaching. I have about 30 adult musicians in group classes a week. Very good. Very few have good routine when practicing. That is
Yeah.
absolutely true. Well, before you go, Mr. Ryan, I first off want to thank you for coming on the show and trusting me that we would have a good time
Well, thank
sharing
you for
with each
inviting
other.
me. I had a blast. Yeah.
So here's what thing. Let's make sure we got your socials out there, your website, and your email before you go. So, especially for our listeners, for our viewers, you can just see it on the screen. But for our listeners, you can email Ryan. By the way, I highly recommend it. He's so amazing. It's messling.ryan@battlegroundps.org. So messling.ryan@battlegroundps. I'm going to guess that you can spell that .org. So messling.ryan@battlegroundps.org. I feel like every week the emails get longer and longer, and my enjoyment of trying to spell gets scary for me. And then can you give us your website for your personal business?
Yeah. So my personal business website, socialsoundlive.com. And if you have any questions about anything that we offer, everything's up there. There's a contact me. If you have any questions, you could always just reach out to me there as well.
Or if you want, that's the business maybe you should be going into. Take a look at it, ask questions. That's one of the reasons I like to share what we all do on the outside out there. And lastly, which I think is amazing, you have a ton of socials. Give us your socials.
On Instagram at Messling Ryan, or at social.sound.music, or at Messling, or sorry, at Mr. Mr. Messling, Messling.
Well, Ryan, sadly, it's time to go
I
already.
know, it's a
But
bummer.
I know, except for me, because I can text you anytime I want to. So there's that. All right, Ryan, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, David. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I will. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Culture Before Content. Don't forget to catch our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or even finding them on Facebook. You can always go to the Music for All page on Facebook and find all the past things, and stay connected with all of them at musicforall.org/podcast. You can always email me at david.duarte@me.com, because I still have an old Apple email that I'll never get rid of because it's great. And we will be back next week for even more inspiring conversations. Just to give you a hint, someone else who does podcasts. It's another chance to interview somebody who interviews. It'll be super fun. But I'm David Duarte, your host, and I'd like to thank everyone on the Culture Before Content team and Music for All for making this show possible. And thanks again to Yamaha, our national presenting sponsor, for their incredible support in bringing these conversations to life. So until next time, take care, reflect, and keep building that culture that drives your music program forward.